Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel Montalvo and this is another edition of Talking GOP. We have on our show today Rabbi Bovit, and we also have Mr. Call Screener Rich Valdez later on the show, so stick around for that. Rabbi, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thank you for coming on to the show. We love to have you here.
A pleasure being here.
So what is it that, so you are a rabbi here in Queens, but I also know that you you're affiliated politically with the Queens Village Republican Club, is that true?
Yes, I've been, for over the last 10 years, I've been a rabbi in Queens, in the Glen Oaks area, the rabbi of Belrose Jewish Center. I'm proud to be the rabbi of that congregation. Being here on your program, I just want to start out by saying the opinions that I'm expressing are my own opinions as an American citizen, and while I would say that quite a number of the members of my congregation share similar views, we also have, just like we're bipartisan in this country, there's two political parties. Both parties' opinions are represented by members of my congregation, so those who don't agree with me, and so the opinions I express are my own. I'm also affiliated with the Queens Village Republican Club. I'm proud to say that I am on the board of directors of Queens Village Republican Club and very active. We are trying our hardest to bring the message of constitutional conservatism to Queens, and we're an extremely active group, and I see us making a lot of progress.
Wonderful. I mean, I've gone to several Queens Village Republican Club meetings, and I've seen the work that, you know, the officers have done to make the club and to carry on its history. And I think what you guys are doing is wonderful for the community and for conservatism as a whole. Now, I would like to ask you, were you always a conservative, a Republican?
No, if you would go in a time machine, let's say we have, you have a nice studio here, but let's say the studio also had a time machine, right. And you'd go in this time machine and you would go back to, let's say, 1971. I was a high school student then. I was involved in the anti-war movement. I could show you pictures. I have shoulder-length hair.
Wow.
And I'm walking around and I'm holding a sign protesting against the war in Vietnam. Wow. I held very left-wing type views. I was not in any way really anti-American, though. That's one thing that I always loved this country.
Right.
I'm the son of a Holocaust survivor. And it was interesting. I was listening to an interview with an author who wrote a biography of Winston Churchill. And Churchill, as a young man, felt that he had a certain destiny. And I think I'm certainly not at the level of a Winston Churchill, but I felt I had a certain destiny also. There was a reason why my father survived the Holocaust. And like a lot of idealistic young people, the left offers you a cause. And at that point, I thought that my cause was that it was justice to end the war in Vietnam. So I became involved in the anti-Vietnam War movement. But even then I saw things which disturbed me. I was very active and I was being recruited. I was part of a group called Student Mobilization Against the War. And because I was very active and I was serving as a marshal at the marches and things like that, I was recruited to come to reach higher things in the movement. And it turned out that student mobilization was a front for a socialist group. And the guys when I went to this office to meet with them, they all looked like Ralph Nader. They didn't look like hippies. They were really like hardcore, old-fashioned communists.
Wow.
And they scared me off even then. But I stayed affiliated with the left, and I ended up moving into the anti-nuclear movement from the anti-war movement.
So you've always been this sort of activist.
I was always very active and very interested in different things. I thought I was trying to help this country, and I thought there was a reason why my father survived the Holocaust.
Right, so it wasn't self-serving. It was never because you personally, as you say, it wasn't because you hated the country like leftists that we see now. It's because you wanted to, in a sense, almost preserve it, and you felt like you had a calling to do so, right?
Well, I felt that I was doing the right thing. Now, my father was a very wise man and saw things that you cannot even imagine a human being seeing and surviving. And he would be very disturbed by what I was doing, and it took me a long time to really understand his wisdom. He would tell me, in those days, when let's say I was getting ready to go to a protest, he would tell me, "What are you doing?" He said in his accent, "What are you doing? Every day you should get down on the ground and kiss the ground of this country and thank God for being an American." That's what he would say. And I get goosebumps on my arms as I quote my father saying that. And it took me a long time to kind of put it all together, but there was a certain number of aha moments, where the little light bulb, like the cartoons, comes up above your head. And in the days when I was active in the anti-nuclear movement, I was also volunteering at a food co-op called the Food Conspiracy Food Co-op. And I was in Tucson, Arizona at the time. I had gone back to college. I was active in the anti-nuclear movement, and I was sitting there, packaging organic cheese or something like that. And I hear some of the people I knew who were also involved in the same type of activities, and they're laughing it up. They're like, they're yucking it up. It's like, what's so funny? So they say, well, didn't you hear? Somebody just shot Ronnie Reagan. And I was absolutely horrified. Now here, I didn't like Reagan then. I didn't understand his message. I had supported Jimmy Carter. I had ridiculed Reagan. I bought into the idea that he was some kind of a mindless puppet, like a lot of people on the left viewed him. They didn't realize what a brilliant man Reagan was. I didn't understand that yet either, but he was the president of the United States. He was my president. And somebody just tried to murder him. And I was horrified by that, and I couldn't understand why these people who claimed to love peace. I mean, we used to have a thing called the Ohm Circle for Peace, where we'd sit around and do that Ohm thing, think we're going to bring world peace, right? And these were people, I used to go to these things with the same people, always they just talked, they would slather themselves in peace, right? And yet here they thought it was funny that someone tried to kill Ronald Reagan. So that kind of moved me in a certain direction. And then from there, I saw that a lot of the people on the left were very hostile towards the state of Israel in an extremely unfair way. And I didn't know much about the issues then. I knew the state of Israel was important, and I supported it, but not in a very knowledgeable way at that point. And their hostility towards Israel and their marching against Israel and supporting of terrorists, that also put a little light bulb on above my head. And I started having to look into those issues. And actually, that's what kind of triggered me to actually embracing more of the Jewish religion, becoming more religiously. No one would have ever suspected that I would become a rabbi at that point.
Wow. And why do you think that we see this anti-Semitism in the left? Why do we think that why do they not support the state of Israel? Why do you think that they're so against it?
Well, the left has developed an ideology where they falsely perceive of Israel as being a colonialist implant in a homogenous Muslim world. And so they've taken the position of Israel being a imperialist outpost. But it's really disingenuous, like everything they do. They just look at it as that they want to get the left is always, right now they're in kind of a unity with radical Islam right now. So they want to get the Muslim world to unite with them in destroying the capitalist West, basically. And Israel is a democracy. There's freedom in Israel. There's many of the same freedoms we enjoy in our country here, people in Israel enjoy. There's freedom of religion in Israel. So the left is against all of those things. They like complete government control. And so therefore, and also they always followed the lead of the Soviet Union. And back in those days, the Soviet Union backed the Arab states in their wars against Israel. So a lot of it's disingenuous. The left puts a veneer of talk about equality and so on and so forth, and liberation and so on and so forth. But it's really disingenuous. It's really about installing totalitarianism, communism throughout the world, and they saw Israel as an impediment to that. So that was really the basis, the original reason for going against the state of Israel, and it still really is what is behind much of their opposition to the state of Israel today, which of course is completely, they're dishonest.
Well, people, you and I are both Republicans, and it's interesting as how you are a religious leader in our community, that people always tell us as Republicans we're Nazis and we're racist. Isn't it? How ironic do you find that?
Well, it's preposterous, because if you just look at facts, the Democrat Party right now, it really is controlled by socialists, and socialists is a cute way of saying communists. And they have people like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib who are openly venomous towards the state of Israel. Now they try to pull this disingenuous little maneuver where they claim you could be against the state of Israel but not anti-Semitic, but that's not true. there's only one predominantly Jewish country in the whole world. That's the state of Israel, which I believe is fulfillment of God's promise to return the people of Israel to their ancestral home.
Right.
I believe this country also, the United States of America, is because of the will of God, a country where anybody can come from any place, and if they become Americanized, they can exercise a concept of God-given freedom. That it's not your rights are not distributed to you from a government, but they come directly from God. But back to the question of the anti-Semitism, if you look at the world today, who are the biggest supporters of Israel and the Jewish people? It's people who are politically conservative Christians. Those are the people who are the greatest supporters and friends of the state of Israel and the Jewish people. The Republican Party is completely philo-Semitic. It's hard to find anybody who has any anti-Jewish animus at all, or any opposition to the essential need for there to be a state of Israel. While on the left, they support the BDS movement, which is a movement to try to isolate Israel, destroy Israel through economic and political pressure, because so far the terrorism and military confrontation hasn't worked alone. Right. So it's another tactic. So, and you see, it's really heartbreaking to me to see how this has taken place, because I know lots of Democrats, and the Democrats used to be, they were, let's say, the old-fashioned Democrat, believed in big government. They thought big government could be helpful, right. But they also had a lot of good ideas too. And there's still some of those old-fashioned Democrats out there. Some of them are still in office, and they're being marginalized right now. And a lot of them are being forced out of their positions as the radical left eats up the whole Democrat Party, and a lot of them, to hold on to their positions, are now being forced to support politicians, hardline leftists, and take positions I believe that they don't really believe in. We saw that recently there was a member of Congress who left the Democrat Party and became a Republican, right, because he didn't want to embrace the fake impeachment effort. Right. So, but in terms of anti-Semitism, it's preposterous when they lay a claim of anti-Semitism on the Republican Party. It's just completely false, and they have nothing at all to stand on.
Right. So, before we get into more local politics here in New York City, I wanted to ask you, do you feel like Trump is doing enough for Israel and for the Jewish community?
He is, there's a Jewish term in rabbinic teaching. It's called, people call it tzidkei umos ha'olam, which means the righteous people, the saintly people of the world. At the top of the list is Donald Trump, which is very ironic, because when he came into running for president, his reputation was that he was a celebrity, he had a reality TV host, a billionaire who had been a playboy. But God works in miraculous ways, and you only have to look into the Bible to see that in the book of Judges, every one of these people who God rose up to be the leader of Israel, a lot of them were not perfect people. You read the story of Samson, right? A very imperfect individual. And it just matters who has the right skills, the moxie to stand up, the chutzpah even, to stand up when it's needed, when it's needed to protect what's right from what's wrong. And that was Donald Trump. Nobody else could stand up to what the Democrats were doing except for Donald Trump. And he's been, he doesn't do this for political advantage. His whole life, if you look at his whole life story, the closest people to him have always been Jews. He's always been a fervent supporter of the state of Israel. This is nothing new. It's not taking a political turn for personal advantage. This is what this man sincerely believes. The state of Israel has never had a better friend. And the Jewish people have always had a great friend in Donald Trump. And look at his family. I mean, his daughter embraced Judaism, and he has Jewish grandchildren. Right. This is a man who, any claim that he is in any way anti-Semitic or doing anti-Semitic dog whistles is once again a complete falsehood with nothing at all to back it up. which seems to be the technique of the Democrat Party these days. They just put out entire falsehoods that are completely devoid of any substantiation, but they use the Goebbels Nazi-like technique of you just repeat a lie continually and people will start accepting it as having truth.
Even FDR had received a letter from people within the Nazi high command. They thought that he was a fascist, one of them, and they had some correspondence. But in speaking of Democrat falsehoods, we've seen in the past that there has been a rise of what's being called as anti-Semitic attacks here in New York City. And we were speaking prior to the show that the demonstration, the protest against these anti-Semitic attacks were in fact lies. And could you explain a little bit more about what you mean by that?
To me, it was actually, I was almost enraged by this. The fact that there would be a march to stand up against the rise in anti-Semitism that we specifically see here in New York City, should be a wonderful thing. The people coming together should be a sign of unity and people coming together, not just the whole Jewish community, but the whole greater community coming together, standing up against anti-Semitism. But just like what they did in Congress, when Ilhan Omar spewed her anti-Semitic venom, she was never condemned by Congress. They did a watered-down statement against bigotry and hate and blah, 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 and it basically rewarded her.
Right.
And that's exactly what they did with this so-called march against hate and fear, because it was not, it was a fake event, because they had, it was only liberal Jewish organizations. Now the ADL is no longer, its real purpose for existing does not exist anymore. The ADL is run by Jonathan Greenblatt, who is an Obama stooge. And they basically just regurgitate Democratic talking points. The JCRC is dominated by, which is the Jewish Community Relations Council, is dominated by left-wing individuals that also just parrot the Democrat talking points. And the New York Board of Rabbis, unfortunately, is an establishment organization that seems to be okay with going along with that. And those are the three main sponsors. There are other Jewish organizations that are left-wing oriented. They didn't invite the ZOA to participate. They didn't invite the Simon Wiesenthal Center, who's for decades has been at the forefront of fighting against anti-Semitism. They didn't invite them to participate. They didn't invite Lee Zeldin, who's a Jewish congressman in the state of New York, out in Suffolk County. They didn't invite him to participate, and they certainly didn't invite Donald Trump, the President of the United States, to address this. So basically, it was used as a propaganda piece to basically deodorize and sanitize leaders of the Democrat Party that have ginned up the anti-Semitism through supporting individuals who have direct connections to people like Louis Farrakhan. And so basically, this was a propaganda event to, I said, once again, to kind of deodorize Cuomo and de Blasio, who basically stand up and support anti-Semites. And here they are speaking up against anti-Semites, and once again, they always pull out this nonsense about white supremacy, when we know that these anti-Semitic events are not done by white supremacists. They're always people who've been motivated by people who are connected to the left.
Right.
This goes on, but they don't speak the truth. Like everything else, it's all fake stuff, all falsehood.
And how do you think our, and you sort of touched on this, but how do you think our glorious leader, the fearless Bill de Blasio, is handling the recent attack of, I believe this lady had gone in and out of jail 3 times, custody 3 times for attacking Jewish citizens?
Well, he just, once again, everything he says is generally a lie. Twice a year, I'm picked up by the police, not for doing anything wrong, but before major Jewish holidays, before Passover, before Pesach, and before the high holidays, the local community service officer will come and pick me up and take me to police headquarters, and there's a huge collection of rabbis there, and a big conference is put on in which they basically speak about security and what, so on and so forth. It's, you know, it's informative to a certain degree, and they always put up the statistics, and of course Jews are the main targets of what they call hate crimes, which I don't actually like that term, hate crimes. because then you're kind of you're criminalizing what people think and what they say. I want to that could go into very Orwellian, and it can become very dangerous.
That's actually a very interesting take on that. I never really looked at it that way.
Well, because it's subjective. What do you call it? A hate crime, and they can make it a hate crime, or they can make it not a hate crime, depending on how it politically benefits them.
Right.
But what they call hate crimes, the Jews are the main targets, and they talk about this. And de Blasio addressed the last one of these meetings that we have, and he got up there blabbering about white supremacy. Now, these acts are not done by white supremacists.
Right.
It's complete falsehood disguise what's really taking place. And right now, people like de Blasio and other Democrat leaders in big cities are creating complete bedlam. You know, like you just mentioned, people who commit crimes because they have this no bail thing. You know, they commit a crime, they get let out. They go commit another crime, they get let out. There is a reason behind it. It is intentional. They're trying to create complete bedlam in the big cities, because when things go really, really bad, then they're going to say, well, we have to step in and have totalitarianism right now to take care of the problem. You have to give us more power, and then we'll take care of the problem for you.
I think what struck me, what saddened me, was when we attended the January meeting of the Queens Village Republican Club, and we had seen that there was a police squad car in front of the synagogue in which we meet in every month, and to think that was a horrible feeling to kick off the new year. You know, we're coming as a time to talk about our community, to meet with friends, and to celebrate, you know, this country. And we have people who could be doing so much more in, you know, we have the police there that could be protecting others, but instead they have to stay vigilant because we are now a target.
Well, a lot of people will be comforted by seeing the police car there. Right now, for instance, our congregation has spoken to the local police, and they're always very nice whenever there's been some kind of an incident. They will give a little bit of an extra security watch on us. They'll have a police car local close by, or they'll make more trips around the block to keep an eye on things. But what's unfortunate is how vulnerable not just the Jewish community has become, but Americans in Democrat-controlled enclaves, cities, have become, because our Second Amendment rights, which the Constitution, which our Bill of Rights say shall not be abridged, have not just been abridged, they've been erased. In the city of New York, hardly anybody could have a carry permit. In other places, people can. So basically, citizens are defenseless. If you look at what took place in Muncie, where that maniac with a machete came in and attacked that Hanukkah celebration, and there's a 72-year-old guy who was attacked, then he probably will never recover. And just think of the nightmares people would have about being hacked with a machete when they're innocently just participating in what should be a festive event. People were defenseless. No one was armed, because in the state of New York, you're not allowed to defend yourself. You have to wait until after the terrible event takes place, until the attack takes place, and then the police will come and clean it up later. In that same weekend, there was an attack in a church in Texas. Fortunately, there were people who were armed, and they killed the perp, and they saved many, many lives. If they were sitting there defenseless, a lot of people would have been killed. In the situation in Muncie, if somebody was armed and that maniac came in with a machete and they took out their firearm, they would have dispatched this assailant, and many people would have been spared the suffering that took place.
But as the saying goes, never bring a knife to a gunfight.
Well, and even if the person was armed with a gun, if you have people who are armed, they could protect themselves. It's a God-given right that we have to protect ourselves. But big government steps in there and says, no, you must be completely dependent upon the government. You are going to be a ward of the state, and you do not even have the right to defend your own life and the lives of your loved ones, your family, and your community. You have no right to do that. Well, that's in complete violation of our Bill of Rights. It's completely unconstitutional. It's just outrageous about how this incremental increase in the control of government over the citizens has been taking place. And that's one of the reasons why, as I grew politically, we started off with our discussion, and eventually I evolved into being politically conservative. And that's, even that term itself is kind of a misnomer. I like to call myself a constitutional conservative, but I'd rather not even really label myself.
Right.
I would just say I'm a patriotic American. And in going in that direction, I saw that the biggest threat, not just to the Jewish community, but to all Americans, was the growth of all-powerful government.
Right.
The government trying to control and interfere in every aspect of a person's life, when the true role of government is there to really to protect our rights, not to take our rights away and say, we will protect you.
Exactly. I think you make great points. I mean, my family has emigrated from Latin America, and they have first-hand experience of what big government can do, and it's bankrupted the continent. In Central America, same thing. And as your family has gone through as survivors of such an atrocity, that people have the gall and the moxie to even deny that exists. And what I find is that these aren't just white supremacists, but these are also leftists that deny that the Holocaust even happened. And that's, I believe, is a shame. And it's incredible that people can even think to begin to reject history.
Well, we have this whole thing going on with Iran right now. Right. The most malevolent state in the world. Right. And this Soleimani, so much blood on his hands. Recently it came out that actually Israel was going to take him out during the Obama administration, and Obama stepped in and protected Soleimani, told Israel that they were not going to let Israel do this. And to show how crazy they are in Iran, they have an annual cartoon contest where people make fun of the Holocaust, that it didn't really take place. That's how crazy they are. That's how malign they are. And the left right now is standing up, and they're caterwauling over the killing of this maniac who should have been taken out a long time ago.
I agree.
And they're crying over. They're saying he was a sensitive poet and he was a great man.
Right. Well, our president has done it again, and he shows that he's for the American people. But sadly, that's all the time we have for today, and it was a pleasure having you on, and we hope to bring you back on in better times.
I would love to be your guest anytime you invite me.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Stay tuned. Up next, Rich Valdez. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Gabriel Montalvo, and here with me is a very special treat. We have Rich Valdez, host of This Is America, and Mr. Carl Screener for the great one, Mark Levin. How are you doing today, Rich?
Hey, Gabriel, thank you for having me, man. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show.
You bet.
So, can you tell us your story? Like, where did you start? Were you always a conservative? Were you always a Republican? And how did you get involved in politics?
Yeah, well, I think for the most part I have always been a conservative. My story, for everybody that listens to the This Is America podcast, they've probably heard it. The story starts with me as a teenager, and I was drawing designs in the sides of my friend's hair. That was the thing back in the 90s. And one of my buddies was like, hey, can you give me a trim? And I did, and I just started messing around cutting people's hair. After high school, I went to school to cut hair, to become a barber. Opened a barber shop, which I had already been building from my dad's apartment. And 2 and 2 makes 4. And I had this business. And when you have a business and you're self-employed, the tax rates are pretty high and they're pretty brutal. Usually between 35, 39%. And I was like, wow, so this is it. I made all this money by myself, and now Uncle Sam is doing a stick-up on me, trying to get all my tax dollars. So that definitely turned me into a conservative very quickly. And that was the beginning for me, where I was like, whichever politicians are against me having to pay all these taxes, I'm in.
Right, and I guess you saw that within the Republican Party, smaller government.
Yeah, I mean, that was, this was the Bush v. Gore era, and that was, Bush had signed those tax cuts, and I was all on board for that. I was like, hey, anything, again, that's going to save me tax dollars, I like it. They were better on issues of faith. They were better on issues, to me, with economics, and they were better on national security. So I felt that the Democrats really didn't have anything for me.
Mm-hmm. So have you, well, I know this, but for those viewing at home, how did you get involved working in political campaigns or under any administrations in particular?
Well, like I said, that was Bush v. Gore, right? And I was
Right.
apolitical, you know, at the time. Starting this barbershop as a 16-year-old in my dad's apartment, and then going on to school and opening a business later on. I got to experience a lot of things. And watching President Bush, or then Governor Bush, handle his election with class compared to how Al Gore was falling apart was really something that gave me pause. And I said, this doesn't look right. You know, I don't think this guy's very hinged. So I got involved in some local politics because I had branched off into another business. I had opened up a cell phone store, with a couple of friends of mine. And there were people from the local governments, like the municipal governments, that would come over and ask us to be a part of something called the Urban Enterprise Zone, where they would charge half the tax. So I said, wow, that's pretty cool. I like half the tax. Not half the tax for me, but half to our customers. So I said, yeah, let's do that. So that got me in the mix of being a business owner and, you know, just mixing and mingling with local politicians. Then I just one day said, you know what, I want to get more involved. And I got involved in President Bush's re-election campaign in 2004. So did some work with the campaign on behalf of the RNC, and actually did it in Derry, New Hampshire. So met a lot of good people out there on that campaign and stayed in touch with them. And then shortly after that, I needed to do an internship, and I did. And I did it with Congressman Scott Garrett in New Jersey's 5th District. And Congressman Scott Garrett at the time was probably the most conservative member of Congress. At least according to like Conservative Review when they score them. So I learned a lot from Scott Garrett and from his chief of staff there, Rich Zioli, and it was a really good time, and I continued to just stay involved with Republican politics. I had a mentor in Mayor Brett Schundler in Jersey City, as well as former Assemblyman Jose Arango, and these guys you know, they were active, and it was like oftentimes when I would meet with them, I would say, hey, look at that, it's like the Republican convention. All three of us are here, because there was very, very few Republicans in Hudson County, New Jersey at the time. So that's kind of how I got involved in politics and stayed in politics and kind of, you know, made some inroads within the Republican Party, eventually going on to be appointed to 2 different positions with Governor Christie once he was elected years later.
And how did you get into the radio business?
So, you know, the radio business is specific, but my first time on TV was in 2004 or 5, talking about politics. And I had a lot of different opportunities, from running for a local office that I ran for when I was 26 to just being involved with different things. So I've always had an opinion, and you know, people have found it interesting, so I've been given a platform here and there. After I left the Christie administration, I wrote a column for the Washington Times, and oftentimes, you know, to promote the column, I would go on different programs and do that, whether it's TV or radio. So I've always been involved in that world of where media meets politics. And I also spent some years working in higher education, specifically with media as a PR director and marketing director, overseeing their admissions efforts. So all of that being said, I was always kind of in that mix and did work in those areas. So I had not done radio specifically, and I had been in touch with Mr. Producer from the Mark Levin Show, who was looking for a new Mr. Call Screener, an associate producer for the show. And they were looking for somebody that was a political person that really understood the issues, but not necessarily a radio person. So we met, we had a discussion, it went well, and the rest is history. Here I am.
Right, and how long have you been doing This Is America for?
This Is America, next month will be a year. So it's been less than a year, and it's been terrific. I mean, we've doubled our downloads in the last month or so, and it's been a long road, but a really exciting one.
All right. And believe me, you do not want to miss a single episode of This is America.
Thank
It
you.
is, and you're very welcome, but it is very informative, has facts, and there's philosophy behind everything that Rich has to say. So, towards the end of the show, Rich will give you all the information where to follow him. But getting back to
Sure.
to you, let's touch on something that I feel like you're very passionate about, which is socialism versus capitalism. I remember seeing a New York Post article about you at the Puerto Rican Day Parade and AOC running away from you. So could you just talk a bit about that?
Sure. Well, they're somewhat exclusive, but not entirely. Obviously, I told you, I grew up in Brooklyn. My parents are born in Puerto Rico. We were not a very wealthy family. My dad worked in a cardboard factory and then was a doorman in Tudor City. My mom didn't work for many years and then was a cleaning person and ultimately died because of injuries that she'd sustained inhaling chemicals from these cleaning products. So it wasn't all roses where I came from. It wasn't the worst either. I mean, we didn't grow up in public housing. There were people that had it worse off than us. But it gave me an outlook onto what life was like. So growing up and getting what you had was fine, but you get to high school and it's like, hey, I want a few different pairs of Timberlands, not the same ones that I've got. And I knew I couldn't go to my parents and ask them to do more than they were already doing. So I had to figure out a way to make more money. And that's how I got kind of creative with the haircuts and stuff like that. So I think if it wasn't for capitalism being a thing in America where you can literally come up on your own bootstraps, start your own business, do your own thing, we'd be lost as a society. And this is why I think I reject anything related to Marx's failed economic theory, because his claims that you have to be part of a class, I disagree. I grew up according to Marx, I grew up in one class, but I navigated through various. Why? Because of many different things. There was encouragement from my parents, there was going to school, there was grit and hard work. So I mean, there's so many different elements that go into this that I can't say that any one of us is married to being in the middle class or being an upper income earner or a lower income earner. So the whole idea of classism or class warfare, I think it's not a good thing, for sure. So that's where my my genuine interest is in always trying to cast the contrast between capitalism and socialism so that people can really see I don't need to stay where I am. If I could be third generation housing projects, I don't need to be the fourth. This is America. You can do what you want to do. There are so many opportunities. There's very little that will stop you as long as you don't subscribe to victimhood. Once you subscribe to victimhood and say, well, this is stopping me, and that's stopping me, and my race is stopping me, and that's stopping me, well, then you're creating obstacles. Outside of that, I would say, Puerto Rican guy, came out of Brooklyn, I've been able to do a lot of different things that I've wanted to do. So that's where that comes from. Now, with respect to my encounter with the Congresswoman, that was, an interesting time because in good faith, I tried to say hello to her. And she kind of was shaking hands with many different people, and I just said, hey, Congresswoman. And she just kind of looked at me, gave me a little side eye, and cut her handshaking short and did the dip. And I mean, it's on video. I don't know what prompted it. I don't know a lot. All I know is I was left whoa. Right after that, one of her staff members came and kind of shoved me, and there's a video of that too.
Oh, wow.
You could see I was like, hey, what the heck? It is what it is. I wanted to invite her on to This is America, and I have publicly dozens of times.
Right.
We've contacted her office, as has Mr. Levin. He's invited her on the program as well, and they've rejected the invitation every single time.
It doesn't seem like she wants to debate anyone or even try and show that she's actually intelligent. I mean, even Shapiro had invited her at one point, and where he offered to donate to her campaign if she even showed up. So I guess she's really that much against the free market where she's rejecting money at this point.
Well, I don't know her motivations. I can't speak to those. I can say I don't think that the critique of her not being intelligent is a fair one. I think she's very shrewd. I think she knows exactly what she's doing. She's got a plan, and she's executing it, the plan very well. And to me, this is part of why I take exception to what she's doing, because I feel that her constituents and Americans overall are drawn to something that is not. Not all that glitters is gold. And I think it's really important that those ideas receive public scrutiny so that people can realize, you know what, we're in Queens right now. The number one issue when I leave here and jump on the 7 train is not climate change. It's not climate change. The hurricane that occurred in Puerto Rico, the earthquake that occurred in Puerto Rico, people can blame those on climate change, but prior to climate change ever being a thing, there were hurricanes and earthquakes. I'm not denying that they may or may not be exacerbated by the climate. What I'm saying is to politicize these things and make it so that Trump did it. These are Trump's fault, or the Republicans that are conservatives are somehow responsible for these natural disasters is asinine. It's ill-placed, and it doesn't help anybody. So I think she should really get in gear and help people. She was elected to help people. There are issues here that are very severe. When she receives that criticism where she says, oh, but the Bronx is one of the worst culprits when it comes to childhood asthma. While that may be true in regionally, overall, it's not. It's not one of the worst on the nationwide level. I think she's splitting hairs to promote her own agenda over the needs of the actual constituents in Throgs Neck, in Jackson Heights, and I think it's wrong.
Right. I mean, growing up in and around her area, I've seen it just being in decline. And it seems like whenever a Democrat controls all tiers of government, and when the party controls it, the quality of life just seems to go down. And walking around Junction Boulevard even, there was a few months back a shooting by 2 gangs. And I find that it's a real shame, but someone like her, she won't address the real problem that we knew about this individual being an affiliated gang member. We knew that he was an illegal immigrant, that he was arrested 9 times. 4 of those times he was charged with a felony, but he was still walking around.
Well, that's because she wants to abolish ICE, right? And she's never met, I like to joke around and say AOC, aliens over citizens.
Right.
And these are the things that kind of irk me, where I think, you know, she could be making such a tremendous difference for this community, for this country, and she chooses not to. She chooses to embrace Bolshevik ideas, these Stalinist, Leninist, warmed over ideas that didn't work then, and they're not going to work now. They do work to the effect of fooling the masses. And this is the part that I really take exception to, and that's why I speak up.
Right. And for me, I just find that seeing somebody that looks like me, supposed to represent part of my culture, like the Hispanic culture and that narrative that she likes to use at times, go back to try and implicate the same things that my people, our people, have gone away from. She could have been a beacon for Hispanics to say, this is what you should aspire to be. But instead, she's keeping them down and indoctrinating them to believe that they still need bigger government. And in turn, that ruins it for everybody else.
Well, you know, this is what is really interesting about this. And you're seeing it in a lot of different places, right? There were Democrats that have run New York City as mayor. There have been Republicans that have run New York City as mayor. But the Democratic Party has been suffering from progressivism for quite some time. And the sad truth about progressivism is that it's not very progressive. I oftentimes on the podcast call them pseudo-progressives because I don't believe that they're advancing or progressing anything. There's no progress involved. It's really alienating any type of discourse, any type of debate, making a government where you're in effect creating a ruling class. And this ruling class is no longer like the lords and the ladies. It's those who live off the government trough. And this is where you see now these extremely highly paid government officials. There is never an emphasis on the private sector. It's work in government or bust. And I think it's just ill-placed. Our society can't sustain itself that way. But it's the swamp, if you will. That's what a lot of people like to call it. And when you create this permanent bureaucracy that is now a ruling class, they believe they have the answer to everything. And they toss out the idea that we are people that can come up with our own ideas and our own things. So I think that is part of the big problem that we see. And they're promoting exactly what they believe. You don't know what's good for you. I know what's good for you. And that's wrong.
Right, that Orwellian Big Brother's watching you type mentality. And do you feel like, because the way the government should work is, you know, they work for us, we the people. You know, we pay their salaries and, you know, we give them our tax dollars. Do you feel like we've somewhat lost that way? Do you feel like that politicians are taking control more and more?
100%. I mean, and exactly in that way. And the way they've done that is, again, you know, Joseph Stalin was once quoted saying that we need to own the means of production. We have to control the means of production. In order to do that successfully, they needed to also own and control the means of information, the means of instruction, and ultimately the means of administration. So you're talking about the media, the means of information. We're also talking about the means of instruction, which is classrooms, whether they're college classrooms or public school classrooms, and also the means of administration, the government, how we divvy all this stuff up. So the only way that they survive is by confiscating your wealth through taxes. The higher, the better, right? The more money that this government that produces nothing can get. They take your money, and then they tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I bless you with health care. I bless you with whatever. It doesn't really work that way. To me, it's a farce, but this is what they want. And this can work in smaller, less diverse communities, and you see it in certain places in the globe. But it's not something that's going to work in the United States.
Right. To touch on what you said, and I know we're kind of going back a little bit in history here, but there was an advertisement that Barack Obama had made, and it was this little girl growing up, and it was that under Barack Obama, this little girl went to school. She graduated. She went on to graduate from college, and she's going through her different life, and it was all under, you know, the government, under Big Brother. And in nowhere was her family there, was anyone who should have a primary relationship with their child, because the government didn't just have a child. It was a family. It was, you know, a mother and a father, ideally, who loved each other enough to have this you know, beautiful girl, and they just want to portray that they can control everything if they wanted to, and it's a scary thought.
Yeah, it's just magical, right? She magically appeared,
right.
The little girl. She magically became educated. Thank you to the awesome government. And these are the things where if you don't stop them now, or not even stop them, at least just challenge them and say, hey, look, there's a different way of doing this, that we don't have to do it the way you're saying. It actually wasn't even always done that way. If you don't bring that conversation to the forefront, people will think that's the way it's always happened. And I think this is part of the real problem that we have. There is so much apathy. There is so much illiteracy when it comes to our founding documents, the Constitution, the Declaration. What is it that government's supposed to be? What actually happened in the American Revolution? Why do we even have an America? Right? So many of these things that come to mind where people they're told something, sounds pretty provocative, I'll take it and run with it. And that's not reality. The government belongs to the people. The people come first. The government's just an instrumentality of ours. Mm-hmm. Anybody that beats their chest and uses the government to strong-arm the people is not somebody that I think we should really get behind.
Right, and you know, in working here in the area, I used to be an after-school teacher, and I worked with kids from kindergarten up until the 4th grade, and they were not aware of civics. And I know that you've also had a hand in opening up a charter school.
Yeah.
So I was on the front lines of seeing what Common Core was and how it affected the students and how they were not understanding. And it was also, the school was over 90% Hispanic American. Many of the students didn't speak a word of English. because, you know, they had just come into the country. And when I saw them, I said, for me, this is a time for me to try and make a change in these students' lives, you know, plant the seed.
Yeah.
And, you know, I felt like, as my job as like a minor educator, I said to them, I said, when you're in this country, and like how you said your show is called This is America, this is in fact America, where you can be who you want to be. And don't let anyone stop you from achieving that, you know, that goal. And if someone tells you that they want to give it to you for free, know that it comes with a cost. And I actually gave an example of socialism. I said, well, you all give, you know, let's say you all have a job, policeman, fireman, whatever you want to be. Give me your money. There's also going to be people who don't work. And I'm going to take all of it and I'm going to give it back to you, what I think you deserve, and I'm going to keep it all for myself. The rest for myself. How do you think you'll feel? By the way, it'll be probably less than half of what you were supposed to get. And they all said, Mr. G, how could you do that? And I said, there are people in this country that want to do that want to control everything that you want to do. And I gave them examples of, well, when I was working with 12 to 14-year-olds over the summer, they had asked me, what is capitalism, what is communism, what is the democracy versus totalitarianism? And they were very intrigued. And it seems that, you know, this education system does a horrible job of explaining different types of government systems. They're failing at teaching young minds, bright minds, civics.
Well, I think they're not only failing in those areas. I mean, think about the last time you went to a hospital and how many people there were native born. Few.
Right.
Why? Because the standards of science and mathematics that are required to become a nurse, to become a doctor, to become a a physician's assistant, are something that native-born and educated Americans are having a hard time with. This is why so many software engineers are imported from other countries, because when it comes to these harder sciences, people are taking a back door because we've been so busy dumbing down our system. And I don't blame Common Core for it. I really blame just a lot of things. I mean, it's probably a whole show that we could do on it. But
right.
the reality is the rigor has dropped. And this is, I'm talking longitudinally for over the last 200 years, not over the last 10, where it has. But it's a big problem that has gotten progressively worse. So there are lots of things that we can do to help kids read at grade level, to be more informed about mathematics, about science, all of the STEM areas, as well as civics. I think civics is a big part of it. But you need to know how to add, and you need to know how to write well and speak well so that you can take advantage of America, right? You can take advantage of the opportunities that are out there so that you can make some money and build a business and do whatever it is that you want to do. Whatever your version of the American dream is, can't be done if you don't have the tools. So I think we owe it to every generation that comes after us to help them with those tools of education.
Would you say, and this will be the last question before we wrap up here, would you say that Donald Trump has kept the American dream alive?
I'd say he's definitely fanning the flame to keep that flame from burning out, while many people are trying to distinguish it or redefine it. And that's the scary part. I think Americans of all stripes, irrespective of political party, just need to wake up and realize, what is it that I stand for? Do I love America? Because in my opinion, you either love America or you don't. So you need to figure out which one do you. And then get on board. Get on board with doing something that's going to help your country so that you can have a successful life and pass it on to your family and generations to come. But you can't do that if you're working against your own best interest.
Right. And, well, that's all the time we have for today. Could you let people know where they can find you?
Sure. I mean, I'm all over social media at Rich Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez with an S, and my website, Rich Valdez with an S, richvaldez.com. And, of course, you can check it out at wabcradio.com as well.
Wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, I highly encourage that you look around for Rich Valdez and all that he does. He is a wonderful man. I've known him for close to a year now, and we look forward to working together on many projects. But aside from that, this has been another episode of Talking GOP. I'm your host, Gabriel Montalvo, and thank you very much for having us here in your homes today. and may you have a great day.